It's episode 38 of the MatStats Show. Jason Bryant here along with Glenn Gormley and Kevin Hazard. And this, the Moneyball of Wrestling, we're going to be diving into statistics as we always do here on the MatStats Show. But today, our annual look into high school participation numbers. So not just today, but also the next two shows, we are going marathon here. 38 and 39 are going to be diving into the National Federation of High School State Associations, the NFHS, even though that acronym doesn't quite work with the amount of words that they have in their title, but NFHS is the moniker. That's the statistics we're using, also from the NWCA's high school surveys that Glenn will get into a little bit here. But been a while since we did a show. We're going to be talking high school participation. This is the numbers that I geek out about. It also is the stuff that we can get into that what ifs. Well, why is this? Why is this? And that. Those are the questions we answer again at NWCA MatStats if you've got a question for future episodes. But Glenn, Kevin, we got stats, we got high school stuff, and granted, it's been since the Lincoln administration that both of you guys were in high school, but, back in the day, we just had boys. Now we've got boys and girls. We're going to be looking at those numbers too, but this is something that's it's a lot of data to dive through, and we're going to do that today.
Yes, I'm really was really excited to do all this analysis for this stuff. I think it's an important topic that people realize the state of high school wrestling 2024.
Yeah, Kevin, you've been a high school coach a lot more recent than Glenn has, and of course, I've never been a high school coach. I don't think anybody wants me coaching, although I do have my USA Wrestling Bronze Certification coaching card in case I need to coach at the World Team Trials. I've got that checked. But from a high school perspective, getting people out for the wrestling program. Your son Brian's first year, he's not coaching high school in decades. So high school wrestling has been near and dear to your family for a long, long time on the coaching side. So these numbers are always important to coaches as well.
Oh, absolutely. And we did have a pool about how fast Brian would get back into the room. I lost because I thought it would be December 15th. He actually went into his new room yesterday. He said it's only a one-time thing, but we don't believe that.
Yeah, wrestling coaches can never, ever stay retired. I don't know why the NWCA has a group called the Retired Coaches. Jack Childs has been a big part of that, but none of those coaches, like, they retire and the next thing you know, they're in the room again. I'm like, wait, what? I remember when Steve Martin first got the job at ODU, and Keith Lawrence had been retired from high school coaching 14 or 15 times by that point. I walk in, there's Keith Lawrence in the room. I'm like, are you what? What? How? Anyway, but wrestling coaches never retire. And of course, my announcing partner is Kevin's son, Bryant Hazard. He spent, 20, almost 30 years, 30 years coaching at his alma mater, Robinson Secondary. They're right across the street from George Mason University, where, he went to college. And now it's at South County. So different high school situation for him. So, and not coaching. So I text him frequently to see how things are going. And of course, wrestling coaches and wrestling people never stray that far away from the sport as it stands. But Glenn, we are going to dive into, and you pull this nerdy music stuff out. And of course, when this slide came up, as it comes up on your screen now, and as always, if you are listening to the show, we have the accompaniment slideshow at mattalkonline.com and nwcaonline.com for the show notes to follow along with this PowerPoint slideshow that you'll be watching on screen. And if you're not watching, again, you can flip along with your phone as you listen on your favorite podcatcher of choice. But also, we're doing this a little bit behind. We're not in November right now. We're recording this on December 4th, hence Kevin's reference of Brian getting into the wrestling before December 15th. But be true to your school. Even I know that one, having sit in the car and trips to grandma's and oldies 95.7 playing this stuff. So I'm giving you this one. This one I know. This one I appreciate.
Yeah, this is back from, you mentioned the Lincoln administration. This is back probably from the Johnson administration, not the Johnson after Lincoln, the Johnson after Kennedy. Be true to your school.
Did you vote for that Johnson too? I think Kevin did.
I did.
The one after Lincoln, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the extent of the politics on this show, by the way, people. No more voting talk. We're good.
Yeah. That was just an insult at me and Kevin's age, not a political thing. Okay, so Be True to Your School is an old Beach Boys song back from when Kevin and I were young. But I thought it fit well since it's a high school thing and we all went to high school somewhere. And, most of the people watching the show actually wrestled somewhere in high school. So anyway, this show, talking about old high school days, Trip Davis and I went to high school together. He's now the CEO of LD Davis Glues and Adhesives. They're the ones that helped keep William and Mary stuck together in the old days. Okay.
Nice pun.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Then when you look at the show,
slipped
like the Jason shows, it's in this episode, in case you want to scroll through quickly. Okay. Why are we here? Mike Moyer approached the three of us and wanted a library in the NWCA MatStats website. And this is what he wanted. He wanted some people that would dive into stats. And of course, Jason's very good as an announcer and knows so many things about it. He doesn't even need to be. He is a library for us. Okay. So that's why MatStats is here, to help educate people on statistics and nothing to do with the moves of the sport. Okay. Then, of course, we have the I feel like a number, normal stuff, the 8675309 that we say every show. And then I have to say, the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect any policies or opinions of the NWCA, nor do Gormley, Bryant, and Hazard always agree with each other on everything we say when it's opinion.
And also remember, no rebroadcast or retransmission of this may be permitted without the express written consent of Major League Baseball.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Felt the need to say that.
I voted for Babe Ruth, too.
The candy bar, right?
Yeah. From Grover, Cleveland. Okay. MatStats is a show that revolves around stats, not opinions, etc. Okay. So let's get into this. We normally start the show with how many 4-year NCAA and NAIA schools there are. There are now 508. Jason does an unbelievable job of keeping track of who drops, who adds, everything. So a couple schools announced they were going to add that we had on the last show. And of course, Jason reminded me not all these schools have added, and some have just chosen not to add due to COVID, budget, whatever reasons. So these are updated as of 11/12 of 2024.
And not on this sheet is junior colleges, because through the research that I've discovered is that has been the biggest ebb and flow of our programs historically. So we had a school, Colorado Northwestern, announced last week it was going to be bringing back its program. It used to have a program up until the mid-90s. And, of course, as we started the show today, or recording on December 4th, news broke that one of Kevin's alma maters, it was then known as Keystone Junior College, Keystone College, announced its closing. So one of the things that we are losing is not dropping programs. It's just the way the economic system works today and the expensive colleges. We're losing programs because whole schools are shutting down. We saw that in COVID, and unfortunately, Keystone is another one of those victims. So sadly, Glenn, next time we do an update on this one, we're going to have to knock a team off of this list, as Keystone College announced it's closing its doors like this week. I mean, end of semester, it's done. So, Kevin, real quick before we talk about that, just you went to Keystone before heading to William and Mary, and there's been some notable wrestling people that are Keystone alums and went the junior college route before going the 4-year route. And we don't talk a lot about junior college wrestling here, but I feel like it's relevant as we go from that bridge, that high school gap to that college gap. Something like Keystone was perfect for you.
It was perfect. I went up in May, and I almost didn't go because it was snowing as I went up to Keystone College in northeast Pennsylvania.
Might as well be in Minnesota.
But I had Larry Fornicola as a coach, who was, of course, a NCAA champ at Penn State, and we had during my time there, we had 2 national champions: Dick Keefe, who went on to wrestle for Penn State, and Neil Duncan, who went on to wrestle for Hofstra. And of course, most of the wrestling world knows Neil from his work with, Resolite and just his Wrestler of the Year. He's been a phenomenal presence and a great friend over the years. And we won our region a number of years, and we, had number of, I think you said there were 14 national place winners at Keystone. So it's a big loss. It makes me very sad.
Yeah, they were a Division III school. Now a lot of these bigger 2-year schools have become 4-year schools, and Keystone currently was a Division III school. So that's where they sit now. So Glenn, of course, unfortunately, we have to dump the Cheerios out of your bowl there. There's another term we want to use, but we probably won't say it on the show here. But we'll have to update those next time. Actually, that's more of some breaking news because that happened about 15 minutes before we recorded the show. So moving forward, Glenn, where are we at with our numbers?
Moving forward, I'll give you some good news after the bad news about Keystone. In 2024, there were more male NCAA wrestlers than at any time since 81, 82. Okay. And I did make this prediction on a couple of shows a couple of years ago that by 2025 we would have that. This is a great stat to know, guys. So anyone who's saying like we're losing the sport is wrong. This is the most anybody who's younger than me. The glory
Everybody's
days
younger
of
than you.
yeah, just about. Yeah. One guy on this show's not. Okay. So anybody younger than me, there are more NCAA male wrestlers right now than there ever were when you wrestled. So that's a great stat.
Again, as you said, more male wrestlers in NCAA recorded history, Kevin.
Yeah, and that is really great news. You know, anybody younger than Gorms and I know that they wrestled at a time where there were, more NCAA male wrestlers than 2024. But now, what can you tell us about the numbers prior to 81, 82, since the NCAA changed how they recorded those numbers?
Well, okay, thank you, Kevin. On slide 13 that Jason is up right now, you can see it was in 5-year increments. Okay, the NCAA now reports it annually. They only did it every 5 years then. And in 71, 72, which was the year after Kevin graduated from William & Mary, they reported 393 teams and 9,400 wrestlers. Okay. However, on the NCAA website, on their sports sponsorship and participation rates record, their exact quote is as follows. Between 1956 and 57 and 1981-82, participation rates were collected in 5-year intervals. The data for these years was not collected in the same manner as data from 82 to the present and includes recreational programs. Therefore, these data are not directly comparable to other data in this report. This information is meant only to provide an historical view. So my thought process is people that are a little bit older than me are somehow their memories are going, or they're just imagining there were more teams there than there really were. Jason is hard at work trying to figure out exactly how many quote-unquote varsity teams the NCAA had back then. It's going to take him some work. So, I mean,
again, this also doesn't include NAIA and junior college teams and California community college teams. So this number is impacted. So the number I'm getting, so I'm looking right now. So I'm through what looks like 1968. 1967 completely. I found 460 schools, but that includes 24 junior colleges, 18 community colleges, and then 287 schools that I still haven't identified whether they are NCAA or NAIA, and some of those schools are duplicates. So we're getting into that, and then we get into the 3-division platform in 1974. So again, we're it's terminology and semantics really is what needs to shape the argument, because we had this many D1 teams. Well, no, because D1 didn't exist until 73, 74. We had 700, 800, 900. No, we never did. We've had that many total, but there's been ebbs and flows. Schools have closed. Schools have merged. Junior colleges have become 4-year schools. The names have changed, and the recording processes of when schools dropped have also changed through that course of history. So again, I'm getting into the minutiae here about college, so I can dig more on this. But just to give you an update, I'm still looking to confirm. We've maybe got counts that I need to just eliminate duplicates. I think we did have over 500 at one point, but to be confirmed, the biggest number I have without cleaning the data is 460 right now in 1967, which, as we have here, says 332, and a lot of those are not NCAA schools, or they're reporting like at one point Texas had, 5 or 6 colleges, big name programs that were only competing against themselves, and they were NCAA schools, but they weren't competing on an NCAA schedule. You'll even find those results in amateur wrestling news. So that is the thing we're looking for, to clean that data to get real numbers prior to 81, 82, and that is not easy. So that's where we're at. Again, little minutia. We don't need to repeat this every episode, but just in case you're coming in and you see these numbers, you're like, wait a minute, what are we talking about? That's what we're talking about. And it is the last time I looked through, I updated about October 29th. So I need to go through, I think I need to go through the amateur wrestling news. Again, I'm taking the NCAA guides from the Hall of Fame, and I'm taking the amateur wrestling news and just trying to find every team I can and then eliminate them. And not every team wrestled the postseason. Like Yeshiva, for example, which dropped a couple years ago. That's a Jewish school in New York City. They didn't compete on Saturdays. So, well, they're not going to have a postseason because you're not going to wrestle on Saturday. But they had a team going back to coaching Henry Wittenberg. So there's those schools. There's like the Maranatha Baptists of the world that existed, that for a long time they were in the NCCAA. So again, we're diving into a tangent that's not focused on high school, but just to give you an update on where these numbers come from. So I will check this off the box to explain for the next 3 or 4 shows. So you won't have to hear this again for a little bit.
But
Thank you, Jason.
Interestingly enough, I think you could probably track how the methodology changed and how it became more exact with the rise in computing. It got more and more precise as computers became more stronger, and more people had them, more people could do it, more people could check. And I think that's why our numbers are much better today than they were, let's say, back when I was in school and we did everything with a quill and ink.
And I'm also going to bring this up too. Again, while we're talking about it, I don't want to lose this idea because I think it's a good one to consider. Again, for years, the doomsday word in run wrestling was the term Title IX. To Kevin's point here, the reason I believe we track this stuff now is there was, of course, it was passed in 1972. It really didn't start getting hammered down on the athletic side of things till 1979. So when the NCAA started to sponsor women's sports and overtook the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, the AIAW, which was really the precursor for all these the dynastic women's basketball programs. And of course, there's programs like Immaculata, and then the power programs like Tennessee were born out of that league. And Old Dominion, where I went to school, we look at okay, now we have to how do we count this? How do we know? So it kind of forced, in my opinion, the stats to be counted. So how do we know we're even or uneven? Well, you got to start counting. So 3 years after the law really starts getting enforced on the college side, then we have participation numbers. So I feel like this is something I didn't think about until recently. It's like, wait, that makes sense of why they track it now, because now you have something to measure. So again, numbers is what would boil down when we look at things. Like, you usually got to go to the numbers. So that's an interesting byproduct of what I believe is that law is like, well, now we have the stats because we have to compare. So something also to consider. Again, not related to this show, but something that just popped up into my head as we were talking about it a couple weeks ago.
Episode 38 is on the high school wrestling participation numbers. Okay. This was done at the request of the NWCA, which is, the parent company of MatStats. So they wanted us to review and analyze, take a look at all 50 states and DC. So the first thing I had to do, and as Jason said earlier, this is from the National High School Federation numbers. Okay. The first thing we had to do is look at the numbers overall, and then episode 39 deals with the survey and questionnaire we sent out. Okay. So on this, in 2024, the past season, there was 291,000 boys high school wrestlers and 64,000 girls. Obviously, the girls were the most ever, and the boys also had 11,000 high school teams, the most ever. These boys' numbers are the highest in the last 10 years, and we've grown 8.3% on the boys' side in participation in 10 years. Now, there was a big spike from 23 to 24 in these things. Anytime I see a spike or an anomaly, it piques my interest. It does for stats people. Okay. I immediately called Dr. Jackie Paquette, Mike Moyer's right-hand woman at the NWCA, and she called the NFHS, this sounds like alphabet soup here.
It is alphabet soup.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it is.
Federation
Make me hungry.
of high school methodology did not change from 23 to 24. And you can see it that in the other sports, all of them on slide 21, you can see that all the boys' sports only went up 2.4% from 14 to 24. We went up 8.3%. So we're doing something better in wrestling than the overall sports are doing. Okay. Now, what about the population growth? Well, from 14 to 24, America's population went up 5.6%. Boys' growth went up 8.3%. Obviously, girls' growth is far exceeding that because it's a growth business. But what I'm saying here is the boys are doing better than the population and sports overall. Somebody is doing something really well, and it's a lot of somebodies. You can see on the chart the explosive growth of the girls from 2014 to 24. Okay. Now, girls wrestling. Where does girls wrestling stand? It now stands 13th in all high school teams. There are more girls high school wrestlers than there are girls field hockey players. That's a staggering thought, guys. And probably when we get the numbers for 2025, we're going to pass indoor track and we'll soon pass golf. That is
Glenn, I want to speak up here too, because I've also learned this growing up on the East Coast, and we all were East Coast people, and we're very familiar with field hockey because it's super popular in the Northeast and that mid Atlantic region. Whereas there's no high school field hockey in Minnesota. Yet Iowa, for example, has a Division I women's field hockey team. So field hockey is one of those sports that it's immensely popular in a swath of the country, but yet some places it's still foreign. So a lot of where we're wrestling, like boys and girls wrestling, say, let's take Kansas, for example. I cannot confirm they have field hockey off the top of my head, but that's a sport where, wrestling, what's field hockey? So we have to also understand that some of our listeners, you may not be understanding what field hockey, its reach is. And lacrosse the same way, because there's these programs in the Midwest that start these field hockey programs. Where are they going? They're going to Pennsylvania. They're going to Maryland. They're going to New York and the Northeast. So field hockey is immensely popular in the Northeast, too. It's a regional sport, but those are also the population centers. So that's one reason you have such good numbers with field hockey.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, now one thing I want to say here is we're going to spend more time on boys than girls because there's not as much data in the past for girls. When I say this is a business term. It's nothing emotional or physical. Boys wrestling is a mature business. Women's wrestling is a growth business. Okay, the women will have higher growth rates than men. Where do men stand in the list, the ranking of high school boys sports? Wrestling is 8th. Okay, the growth rate from 14 to 24, like we talked about, in the number of teams is 4.5%. Okay, in the number of percent. Now, one of the interesting things is in the number of teams, the 3 smallest growth are football, basketball, and baseball, the big 3 sports. So many people here at the Nationals in Philly in 2025 will be, football, basketball, baseball is getting everything. That's not the truth in the number of high school teams on the boys' side. Okay. The high school numbers, I went all the way back to 1970. Okay. 2024, the 291,000 is the most I found that at any time since 1978. They used to do it every other year back then. They had 3 really high spikes, or what I call anomalies or spikes. Okay, so right away, this just piqued my interest. Why did it drop from 338 to 281,000 from 78, 79? Okay, so I went and looked for this stuff and tried to find out what's going on. So what happened when I noticed this anomaly from 78 to 79, nobody can dig out anything better than Jason Bryant can. So Jason sent me this link from the National Federation of High School sports. Note, due to a more sophisticated information gathering system, figures beginning with the 1979 NFHS participation survey are generally lower than surveys of the previous 4 years. The main factors resulting in this decrease include the listing of the United States schools only and listing of senior participation only. Previous survey figures included some Canadian high school participation and some U.S. junior high school participation. No true comparison can be made between 79 survey and the surveys after that. Now, guys, that is two nice big hunks of information we've given you on this show. One about the NCAA, how those numbers were changed, and we talked about how we all of a sudden realized we had to get them, and how it's changed in the high school stuff after 79. I'll give you a perfect example of this guy, since we already mentioned Trip Davis earlier in the show. In 78, Trip was in middle school. In 79, he was a freshman at my high school. Okay. So in other words, in the 78 survey, he would have counted wrestling in middle school. Okay. And then 79, of course, he would count because he was in high school then. So there's an example, and pretty topical since we already mentioned that in the show, of how that's changed. So once again, guys, anybody who thinks that they wrestled back in the glory days, okay, there's nothing wrong when we wrestled, okay, there's more wrestlers now, high school males, than there's ever been.
Okay, so 2024, we've got the most boys high school wrestlers. You're saying with confidence that using reliable NFHS data, we saw more high school wrestlers this year than ever before. But what can you tell us about state by state breakdown?
Certainly, Kevin. Okay. On this list here, we have the state rankings for all high school wrestlers. That means boys and girls. I'm not going to read out the 51 states because we count DC as one of them. But it goes California, Texas, Ohio, Illinois for total. Then we go to boys, okay? And the boys goes California, Texas, Illinois, and Ohio, okay? And then PA. And the girls goes California, Texas, Ohio. You're starting to get a trend here.
How about number 4, though, with the girls? Iowa. It did not take them long to go from no high school wrestling to an unofficial tournament to the girls' high school union sanctioning it to hit numbers that are 4th in the country. Big props to how they did to the state association. It took them a while. Now there's 2 athletic unions. There's one for the boys and one for the girls in Iowa. But like that's awesome. I love that because getting Iowa high school girls wrestling it's a thing. I mean it's just wrestling in Iowa is religion. We know that, but like just to see Iowa sitting there 4th in 5 years, it took them from 0 to 60 in 5 years. Yep.
So the next slide shows state rankings of boys' growth rates in participation. Now, I mentioned earlier about the difference between a growth and a mature sport. Mississippi and Alabama lead the pack on this, followed by Arkansas. Those are newer states to the game, okay? Where down near the bottom, you find New York and Illinois, which are very mature wrestling states.
Okay. And also, Glenn, one thing to look at, like if you look at Vermont, down X amount, well, again, when the smaller sample size you have, the difference of 10 wrestlers impact. 10 wrestlers is not going to affect California. 10 wrestlers is going to impact Vermont based on just the number of athletes in those schools. So I don't want to say grain of salt because we're stats guys, but Mississippi went from no high school wrestling sanctioned tournament 3 years ago to now, all states have a high school state tournament plus DC. So again, growth versus whatever, but also keep an eye on outliers in smaller data sets that will sometimes skew a percentage.
Yes, exactly. So what we move to next is Correlation 101. I just want to explain this to everybody who hasn't seen this show before. Correlation does not prove causation. Correlation is measured by what we call the Pearson coefficient. The coefficient goes from +1 to -1. +1 would be a direct positive linear correlation. 0, there's no correlation. -1 means there's a negative correlation. A good way to look at negative correlation, Jason's in Minnesota. I'm in Knoxville. It's freezing cold here, so I'm sure it's cold in Minnesota. The lower the thermostat goes, the more clothes you wear. Okay, that's a negative correlation. All right. Now, so let's look at some of the correlations that we learned by the boys' participation, the girls' participation. The major reasons that some states have more wrestlers than others, there's three major reasons: population, population, and population. Okay, the boys' population and participation rate in 24, the correlation is 0.9 positive. The girls is 0.8. Okay, that is as big as a correlator as you can get, basically. Okay, so there's a reason that California's number one. And then what Jason brings out, Iowa with the girls, we'll get into that later. It's very interesting. There is no correlation between boys' growth rate and population growth rate, which is really interesting since there is a correlation between population and participation. You would think that would also follow suit. But what you can assume here, guys, is the states that are growing, there's more to it than just population. Iowa girls being the perfect example of that. No correlation between population growth and boy, at least that somebody is doing something well. That's what we just talked about there. Okay. Kevin.
Okay, so high correlation between population and participation. No correlation between growth and population. So there's something else at play. Can we look at the states and per capita and look at the state rankings and see if we can pick up anything from that?
Yeah, sure, Kevin. I did the state rankings for boys and girls combined, boys and then boys, comma, girls. Okay. Interestingly, it was smaller states that are way up in per capita. And because it's per capita, it's still interesting with this. It goes Nebraska, Iowa, Wyoming, Kansas, Montana, North Dakota, Idaho, South Dakota. You get my point here? It's smaller states that are doing it.
It is funny, Glenn, you bring this up because every year when we talk about best wrestling states and you're looking at number of All-Americans at the D1 championships, I love Iowa wrestling fans, whether it be Iowa State, Northern Iowa, University of Iowa, whether it be all those D3 schools. The state of Iowa's wrestling fans are very passionate. We talked about how it was religion earlier. But you cannot have a conversation about numbers without Iowa high school fans or Iowa college fans in totality bringing up per capita. It just, hey, yeah, PA has the most All-Americans. Yeah, but what about per capita? So this comes as no surprise that Iowa is near the top when it comes to per capita in our MatStats show. They're right. They're right. Per capita, yes. Iowa's up there, always.
Yeah. I'll be a big celebrity in Iowa at the national tournament giving this information. Okay. Now, the charts are on the thing if you want to look at them because we're not going to read out all 51 states for the three categories.
Again, we have boys and then we have girls per capita. Girls per capita, okay, there's your coefficient or whatever. What do these numbers mean, just real quick?
Okay, this is for the boys, girls are combined. It's girls high school wrestlers per 1,000 state population.
Okay,
so
gotcha. That's what we're looking at. That is not a coefficient number.
0.9 girls wrestlers per 1,000 state population. Not the state population of the high schools, the total state population. Okay?
All right, gotcha.
There is no correlation between participation numbers and per capita. Okay, which is interesting. Next, here's something very interesting I found out about Iowa girls and PA boys. We did the per capita. Iowa girls per 1,000 is 0.91. PA boys is 0.93. Okay? Think about this for a second, guys. If Iowa plays Penn State in football and they play at a neutral site, so there's even amount of fans, Iowa fans and Penn State fans, and a random distribution of fans, there will be as many girls high school wrestlers at that game from Iowa as boys high school wrestlers from PA. That's
interesting to Jason's point, how fast the Iowa girls has brought their number up to where they're it's a significant part of their population are now wrestling. The girls are.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. So we've got 6 states: Nebraska, Iowa, Wyoming, Kansas, Montana, North Dakota lead the way in per capita participation. And it's the same states in all 3 tables. They're all smaller population states. And the questionnaire we sent out did not ask any question. It might help us, learn why this is. Is there any way in the future that we could ask questions that might help us learn why these particular states lead in per capita participation? And let's talk about more information you uncovered from the state numbers from the National Federal of High School States.
Okay. The next thing I found out, there was a very large correlation between boys and girls participation numbers. But this is no surprise because the biggest correlator is the population. Okay. But it's still good to see there's a strong correlation there. 0.86 if any guys are recording Poisson coefficients.
You might be the only one.
I might be the only one. Okay. There is no correlation between boys' participation numbers and four-year colleges with boys wrestling. But there's a moderate one for girls. This is very interesting. It could be, once again, because girls is a growth industry. But the fact that there's no correlation between all the teams that the state of Pennsylvania has on the boys' side and the number of boys' participation is really mind-blowing. That did surprise
now,
me.
I have a question about that, though, because
Sure.
we look at that, or this is not necessarily a question, it's more of a discussion topic, because that seems to defy logic, because as we know, it's like the people that wrestle at these colleges, that's kind of been one of our speaking points. Okay, you go, you wrestle, then you go back, then you stay in your state, you teach at your high school, then you're coaching the next group, you're combing the hallways, and it's the brothers now, and then now the sisters that are wrestling because their coach wrestled, and there's this PE teacher that wrestled at, say, Waynesburg or wrestled at Teal or something like that are staying in the community. So I'm trying to wrap my head around, okay, so the fact that there's all these college wrestling programs in PA has, or insert state here, has no impact on the number of high school wrestlers. So you're saying there's no correlation there?
None whatsoever. I was very surprised at this, that there was none whatsoever. My best guess on this, and this is a guess, guys, is that the largest states by population, California, Texas, Florida, do not have nearly as many colleges or tradition as PA, Ohio, New York do. So a lot of these young men and women are going out of state from those large states. But there is a moderate correlation on the women's side, which leads me to believe there's not a tradition of women's wrestling in colleges because it just started recently. Okay, so that's my thoughts on that, guys.
Interesting.
And also, I mean, Jason brought it up earlier. We looked at the Vermont numbers, and 10 can skew the results, and there's so many less women's wrestlers. Maybe that's also part of the equation.
Very well can be, Kevin.
Yeah.
Very well could be. All right, slide 54.
All right, boys and girls, for your colleges and team size. We really can't link a correlation between boys and girls participation numbers since population is the driving force. No correlation between high school participation and numbers of four-year schools for boys, moderate for girls. Could be a mature versus growth issue. And boys high school participants and team size had a drop in correlation from 2000 to 24. And what do we know about the growth of boys high school wrestling and population growth?
Okay, what I did there is I put a slide together to see the real growth, when you control for population growth. I took the growth from 14 to 24 for the states, the percentage, and then subtracted the growth of that state population. Once again, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas are anomalies. Vermont on the other side is an anomaly because they have such small numbers. But this we can really see, by and large, what states are growing in relation to their population states. And we can, Kevin mentioned earlier about a questionnaire for our annual show in 2025. We can specifically get some questions and ask some of these states specifically, like, why is Oklahoma really growing on this? Why is New York, Illinois, Minnesota not, that are traditionally really strong wrestling states? Okay. Now, I'm going to go into something else here, guys, that's called a skew. A skew is when you look at a graph. For example, when the mean, when I say mean, that's what you guys call average, the arithmetic mean. Okay. The median is a number when there's as many numbers above as there are below.
Mean, median, and mode.
You got it. Mode is the most common one. Okay. If the mean is less than the median, we call this a left skew. So it's a left tail on the graph. If the mean is above the median, it's a right skew. I'll give you a good example of this, guys. An easy one would be income. Now, technically, you can make more than $0 in a year if you're corporation stuff. But if you're an individual, you could make.
Or if you work in wrestling.
Yeah. Believe me, I'm still suffering from the negative money I made. Okay, so when you go from $0 a year income to all the way on the right-hand side, which will be the super billionaires, the Elon Musks of the world, okay, that causes a right-hand skew, okay, because the mean is higher than the median. Because Elon Musk's income will skew the whole graph. Now, what usefulness does this do? Well, what I found out is where there's the mean is greater than the median, where boys' high school participation, girls' high school participation, etc. And I found out that these are rightly skewed graphs, and we can use this data to help us ask some questions, specifically what states are to the left and to the rights of these.
So we're going to do follow-up questions for certain states in our 2025 survey. We want to find out even more information. We need to, for our MatStats show in 2025, we need to ask more questions to help us grow wrestling and send them to the 12 states mentioned previously. We're working right now to formulate those questions for the 2025 survey. And again, if you're listening and if you can think of questions, send them in. I think that would help us. And tune in next year, and we'll go in with more in-depth answers for this.
And again, to jump in on that with those on X at NWCA MatStats. Glenn, you've got an email address for the show too, right?
NWCA MatStats at gmail.com.
All right. So yeah, NWCA MatStats at gmail.com or at NWCA MatStats on the socials. That one specifically to X, so we can get that one. So if you've got those questions, and these, again, as you watch along or listen along, you're like, well, wait, what about that? Drop a note. Tell us right now, because we'll log them in and we'll put them together. So
I think something pretty interesting we could do with that. If you're in a state that has the high growth and the high growth numbers, tell us who there's usually, when you see that you've got a really strong organization, and who's the driving force on this. There's usually a couple of people that drive that kind of growth, or whatever the things that states are doing well. Let us know who those people are. Maybe we could go talk to them. I think that would
Absolutely.
be really interesting.
Yes.
All right, Glenn, I think it's time for Kev's notes, right?
Yes, it is. Roll the drum.
Okay, Kev notes for episode 38. There are currently more NCAA male wrestlers than at any time since at least 1982. The NCAA has gone from 59 teams in 2024 to 86 teams in 2025. That's
women's teams.
Women's teams.
Yeah.
In 2024, There are 11,149 high school boys teams and 291, almost 292,000 high school boys participants. Big numbers. There appears to have been a change in the methodology at the NFHS from 1978-79. Thereby, MatStats believes that there are more high school male wrestlers in 2024 than ever. Boys high school participation numbers grew at 8.3% from 14 to 24. This exceeds the population growth, 5.6%, and the growth of all the boys' high school sports, 2.4. So big numbers for the boys. Number 6, in 2024, 64,000 plus girls' high school wrestlers. That's more than field hockey. Now the number 13 most popular girls' high school sport. 550% growth rate for the girls' high school wrestling in the last 10 years. That's just off the charts. The top states for participation per capita for wrestling are Iowa, Kansas, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, and Wyoming. Population is the single biggest correlation, as Glenn said. Three biggest is population, population, and population. And we're going to do this study again in 2025, and MatStats will have additional grassroots questions for the future questionnaire to see why some states grow and others do not.
Thank you, Kevin. And just to wrap up, show 38. Okay, part 2 of this show is Wednesday, December 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And tune in next month, same Matt time, same Matt channel. Next month, we go into dive deep into the state surveys and questionnaires that the NWCA sent out to all the states. Speaking for Jason and Kevin, we're signing off. See you next month. From MatStats, I'm Glenn Gormley.